The card reader beeped red for the third time, and Hannah Reyes watched the old woman's hands begin to shake around a coupon that was not going to save this transaction. "Ma'am, I need you to step aside." The cashier's name tag said Denise, and Denise had already reached for the phone mounted beside her register. The universal gesture that meant security or worse. "I've got a line behind you." The old woman, small and silver-haired in a wool coat too heavy for the mild evening outside, kept sorting through a coin purse that clearly did not hold enough, her mouth moving in soft, apologetic Italian that nobody around her understood and nobody was trying to. "I have it," the woman said, finally, in English, though her voice wavered with the particular humiliation of being watched fail in public. "One moment, please. I have it." "You've had 4 moments," Denise said, and there was nothing kind in it. The practiced impatience of someone who had learned that customers like this one rarely generated complaints that stuck. "I'm calling my manager." Hannah had exactly $11 in her checking account until Thursday, and a basket in her own hands holding the cheapest possible version of a week's groceries, rice and eggs and the store brand bread that went stale by day 3. She had scrubs on under her coat, the pale blue fabric still smelling faintly of the hospital's antiseptic wash, because she had come straight from a 12-hour shift without stopping to change, too tired and too broke to waste the gas driving home first. She should have kept walking toward her own line. She had rent due in 6 days and a landlord who did not accept apologies as payment. But she stepped forward anyway. "I'll cover it," Hannah said, setting her basket down on the belt beside the old woman's groceries. A small collection of pasta, canned tomatoes, and a single wedge of cheese that could not have cost more than $15 total. "Whatever she's short." Denise's eyes flicked over Hannah's scrubs, her tired face, the basket that did not suggest money to spare, and something skeptical crossed her expression before she shrugged and rang the total anyway. The way people did when free money appeared, and questioning it seemed like more effort than accepting it. "23.18, Denise said. Hannah's card had $400 in it. Money meant to stretch across 2 weeks of everything, and she watched it drop to just under $380 without letting her face show the calculation happening behind it. The old woman turned toward her, dark eyes suddenly wet, and pressed both hands around Hannah's wrist with a grip stronger than her frail frame suggested she had. "Bless you," the woman said. "Bless you, child. What is your name?" "Hannah." "Hannah." The old woman said it like she was memorizing it for later use. "I am Lucia. You did not have to do this." "Nobody should have to be humiliated over groceries," Hannah said, and meant it, gathering her own bag and helping Lucia gather hers. The two of them moving toward the exit while Denise had already turned to the next customer without a second glance at either of them. That was the last easy moment of the evening, and neither of them knew it yet. The parking lot outside the store was nearly empty, the evening gone dark early the way it did in late autumn, and Hannah was helping Lucia toward a black sedan idling near the entrance when the driver's door opened and a man unfolded out of it with a stillness that made every instinct in Hannah's body go quiet at once. He was tall, dressed in a dark wool coat over a suit that even Hannah, who owned exactly one dress suitable for job interviews, could tell had never come off a rack. His eyes found Lucia first, softened, and then found Hannah, and something in them sharpened into an attention so total it felt almost physical. "Nah." His voice, when he spoke, carried none of the coldness his face suggested he was capable of. "You said you'd call when you were ready." "I did not need to call," Lucia said, waving one hand dismissively. "This girl helped me. My card would not work at the store, and this one, Hannah. She paid for my groceries without knowing me at all." The man's gaze returned to Hannah, and she felt it land with a weight that made her suddenly conscious of the antiseptic smell still clinging to her scrubs. The exhaustion she knew was written plainly across her face after 12 hours on a med-surg floor. "You paid for her groceries," he said, not quite a question. "It was $23, Hannah said, feeling suddenly defensive without understanding why. "It wasn't a big deal." "It is a big deal," he said. "To the person who did it with $11 left until Thursday." Hannah went very still. She had not said that number out loud to anyone, not even the coworkers she complained to during break room lunches, and the fact that this stranger had guessed it or somehow known it sent a current of unease through her that had nothing to do with his cologne, cedar and something darker beneath it, or the way he stood like the parking lot itself had rearranged its priorities around him. "How would you know that?" she said carefully. "I don't," he said. "I guessed, based on the shoes you're wearing with 3 months left in them and the fact that you paid for a stranger's groceries in scrubs that say you just worked a double." "I'm rarely wrong about people, Miss Reyes," Hannah said, before she could decide whether giving her name was wise. "Hannah Reyes. Dante Moretti," he said. "This is my grandmother. I would like to thank you properly for what you did tonight, Miss Reyes, in a way that is not $23 standing in a cold parking lot." The name landed on Hannah with a slow, sinking recognition, the kind that came from 6 months of overhearing hospital gossip about a patient who had once been admitted under armed guard, about a family name that made the ER charge nurse go quiet whenever it came up. Moretti. She had heard it before, always in the same lowered voice people used for things they understood to be dangerous. "That's not necessary," Hannah said. "I did it because it was the right thing to do, not for a reward." "I know," Dante said, and something in his voice suggested this answer was exactly the one he had expected, and exactly the one that interested him most. "That is precisely why I intend to insist." Hannah drove home that night with her hands tight on the steering wheel, replaying the exchange in the parking lot until it stopped making sense in any direction she turned it. She had grown up in a neighborhood where certain names were spoken carefully, where her own mother had once crossed the street rather than walk past a particular restaurant on Arthur Avenue, and she understood, in the narrow, deep way that came from that kind of upbringing, exactly what kind of family the name Moretti belonged to. She told herself it did not matter. She had paid for an old woman's groceries out of basic decency, and that decency did not require her to become entangled with whatever the woman's grandson actually did for a living. She would not hear from either of them again, and in 3 days she would forget the weight of Dante Moretti's attention entirely. She was wrong within 48 hours. The knock on her apartment door came on a Tuesday evening, while Hannah stood in her kitchen eating cereal directly from the box because it was cheaper than cooking for one person and she was too tired to care about dignity at this point in the week. She checked the peephole out of habit built from 3 years of living alone in a building where the locks were original to the 1970s, and found Lucia Moretti standing in the hallway, wrapped in the same wool coat, a small paper bag clutched in both hands. "I hope I am not intruding," Lucia said. Once Hannah opened the door, already stepping past the threshold with the easy confidence of a woman who had spent a lifetime being welcomed into rooms. "I asked around. It was not hard to find a hospital employee named Hannah Reyes, who works the med-surg floor." Hannah's stomach tightened at the casualness of that sentence. The reminder that this family had resources most people did not. The ability to locate a stranger's home address within 2 days without apparent effort. "Mrs. Moretti, I don't usually have people from the grocery store show up at my apartment." "I brought you dinner," Lucia said, setting the paper bag on Hannah's small kitchen counter, unpacking a container of something that smelled like it had been made hours ago with more care than Hannah's own cooking had ever received. "My grandson wanted to send money. I told him money was an insult to what you did." "This is not an insult. This is a grandmother feeding someone who was kind to her." Hannah looked at the container, homemade pasta with a sauce that had clearly simmered for hours, and felt something in her chest loosen despite every instinct telling her to remain wary. "Thank you," she said finally. That's really kind." "Sit," Lucia said, already pulling out one of Hannah's 2 mismatched kitchen chairs. "Eat. Tell me about this job that has you buying groceries with $11 to your name." Hannah found herself talking more than she intended over the next hour, about the hospital, about the rent that climbed every year while her wages did not, about a father who had left when she was young and a mother working 2 jobs back in Providence who could not help even if she wanted to. Lucia listened with the particular attentiveness of someone who had clearly decided, somewhere in the last 2 days, that Hannah Reyes mattered to her personally, and by the time the older woman rose to leave, something had shifted between them that Hannah did not fully understand yet. "My grandson will come to see you," Lucia said at the door, pulling her coat tighter. "He does not do this for many people. Be gentle with him. He is not as cold as his reputation suggests, though he works very hard to seem that way." "I don't need him to come see me," Hannah said. "I'm not looking for anything from your family." "That," Lucia said, with a small, knowing smile that Hannah would remember later, is exactly why he will come. Dante Moretti did come, 3 days later, though not the way Hannah expected. She found him in the hospital's own parking garage at the end of a shift, leaning against a car that was not the black sedan from the grocery store, dressed in a charcoal suit that seemed engineered specifically to look unremarkable while somehow drawing every eye in the garage toward him anyway. "This is either extremely thoughtful or extremely alarming," Hannah said, stopping a careful 10 feet away. "I haven't decided which yet." "I came to ask you to dinner," Dante said. "Not the kind my grandmother makes. The kind where I get to properly thank you for what you did, and you get to tell me it's unnecessary at least 3 more times before you agree." Despite herself, Hannah felt the corner of her mouth twitch. "You seem very confident I'll agree." "I'm confident you're exhausted," he said, "and haven't eaten a meal that wasn't cereal from a box in longer than you'd like to admit." "My grandmother mentioned the cereal. She was very concerned about it." Hannah's face went warm with embarrassment. "Your grandmother has boundary issues." "My grandmother has opinions about everyone she meets within the first 90 seconds, Dante said. "And she has decided, quite firmly, that you are someone worth paying attention to. I have learned, over 34 years, not to argue with her instincts. They are rarely wrong." Hannah studied him in the flat fluorescent light of the parking garage, the stillness of him, the way he held himself like a man who had never once, in his entire adult life, needed to raise his voice to get what he wanted. She understood, somewhere beneath the caution that 3 years of city living had trained into her, that agreeing to dinner with Dante Moretti was agreeing to something larger than dinner, though she could not yet name what that something was. "One dinner," she said finally. "As a thank you. Nothing more." "One dinner," Dante agreed, though something in his eyes suggested he considered this an opening negotiation rather than a final answer. The restaurant he took her to 3 nights later was not flashy. A small family-owned place in a neighborhood Hannah recognized from childhood trips with her mother, and the owner greeted Dante by name with the particular deference Hannah had started to notice followed him everywhere, a respect that had nothing to do with charm and everything to do with something unspoken beneath it. "You didn't have to bring me somewhere this nice," Hannah said, once they were seated, glancing at a menu with prices that made her calculate, out of habit, what percentage of her weekly grocery budget a single entree represented. "I wanted to," Dante said. "And before you ask, no, this isn't about impressing you with money. I could have taken you somewhere far more expensive. I brought you here because the food is good and the owner has known my family for 30 years and will not overcharge either of us." "Practical," Hannah said. "I wasn't expecting practical from you." "What were you expecting?" Hannah considered the question honestly. "I've heard the name Moretti before. Not from you. From hospital gossip. From my mother crossing streets when I was a kid. I was expecting someone who enjoyed being frightening." Something crossed Dante's face, brief and unguarded, gone before Hannah could fully read it. "I don't enjoy it," he said. "It is simply useful, sometimes, for people to be careful around me. It keeps them from making mistakes that would otherwise require consequences neither of us would enjoy." "That's not really an answer." "No," he agreed. "It isn't. It's the closest thing to an honest one I can give you on a first dinner." He met her eyes directly. "My family does business that most people would consider dangerous. I will not pretend otherwise to you, Hannah Reyes, because you strike me as someone who would see through the pretending within a week anyway." Hannah sat with that for a long moment, the honesty of it landing harder than any reassurance would have. "Why tell me the truth instead of just being charming?" "Because you paid for my grandmother's groceries with $11 to your name," Dante said, "and asked for nothing in return. People who do that deserve better than being lied to." The dinner stretched 2 hours longer than either of them seemed to expect, conversation moving easily between careful subjects and ones that clearly cost Dante something to discuss, and by the time he walked her to her car in the restaurant's small parking lot, Hannah understood that whatever this was becoming, it had already moved past the boundary of a single thank-you dinner. "I'd like to see you again," Dante said, standing close enough that she could smell the cedar note in his cologne clearly now, close enough that the parking lot's dim light caught something unguarded in his eyes that she suspected very few people ever got to see. "Not out of obligation. Because I want to." "This is a bad idea," Hannah said, though she made no move to open her car door. You know that, right? Whatever your family actually does, it's not compatible with someone who works 12-hour shifts and worries about rent. Probably not, Dante agreed. I've never claimed to be a good idea for anyone, Hannah. I'm simply asking if you'd like to find out anyway. She should have said no. Every practical instinct she owned told her that dinner with a dangerous man's grandson was the kind of decision that ended badly in every story she had ever heard growing up in a neighborhood that understood exactly what families like the Morettas cost the people who got close to them. Yes, she said instead. I'd like to find out. The danger arrived faster than Hannah expected, less than 2 weeks into whatever she and Dante had quietly become. On an evening when she was leaving the hospital later than usual after a shift that had run long with an emergency admission, she noticed the man following her before she consciously understood why. A presence at the edge of the parking garage that matched her pace too precisely to be coincidence. And by the time she reached her car, her hands were already shaking with an adrenaline she recognized from every self-defense class the hospital had ever required its night staff to take. She did not scream. She had learned, over 3 years working the overnight shift in a city hospital, that screaming rarely helped and often escalated situations that quiet thinking could still control. Instead, she walked directly toward the security booth at the garage exit, moving with deliberate calm, watching in her peripheral vision as the man behind her hesitated, clearly unprepared for a target who refused to panic. "I need help," Hannah said to the security guard, her voice steady despite her racing pulse. "There's a man following me. Dark jacket, about 30 feet back." The guard looked past her, and whatever he saw made him reach immediately for his radio, calling for backup with a speed that told Hannah this was not the first time strange men had lingered around this particular hospital watching for particular employees to leave alone. By the time 2 more guards arrived, the man had vanished into the parking structure's shadows, and Hannah found herself sitting in the security office with her hands still trembling, giving a description to guards who exchanged a look she did not understand until Dante arrived 20 minutes later, having been called by someone in hospital security, who apparently knew exactly who to contact when Hannah Reyes was involved in anything unusual. "Tell me everything," Dante said, kneeling in front of her chair, his hands cupping hers, and Hannah noticed, even through her own fear, that his hands were perfectly steady in a way hers were not. She told him, watching his expression go from concern to something colder and more controlled as she described the man's build. His patience, the way he had matched her pace without ever quite closing the distance. "This isn't random," Dante said. Once she finished, his jaw tight. "Someone sent him. Someone who knows you're connected to me now." "Connected to you how?" Hannah said. "We've had 4 dinners, Dante. I'm not exactly your girlfriend." "You're exactly enough of something to make you a target," he said. "To a man named Vincent Salerno, who has spent 8 months trying to move product through territory my family controls, and who has recently discovered that the fastest way to force my attention is to threaten something I clearly care about." Hannah's stomach dropped. "Someone was following me because of you. Someone was following you because Salerno believes I will make mistakes to protect you," Dante said. "And he is not entirely wrong. I need you to understand something, Hannah. I did not intend to put you in danger by pursuing this. But I also will not pretend the danger doesn't exist now that it has already found you." "Then what do we do?" Hannah said, and she heard her own voice steady despite the fear still coursing through her body. "We make sure it never finds you again," Dante said, and something in his voice made Hannah understand, fully, for the first time, exactly what kind of man she had chosen to let close to her life. The following week passed in a strange, tense equilibrium. Hannah's apartment suddenly watched by men Dante trusted. Her drive to and from work escorted without ever feeling like a cage. And though part of her resented the loss of the independence she had built over 3 years of managing entirely alone, a larger part of her understood that refusing the protection would accomplish nothing except making her more vulnerable out of stubborn pride. It was during this week that Hannah did something she would later recognize as the moment she crossed a line she could not uncross. She overheard, quite by accident, a conversation between Dante and one of his men discussing Vincent Salerno's known movements, a warehouse near the docks, a schedule that repeated every Thursday evening, and instead of staying silent the way any reasonable, uninvolved bystander would have, she spoke up. "I know that warehouse," Hannah said. stepping into the room where Dante and his associate had assumed they were alone. "I did a home health rotation in that neighborhood 2 years ago. There's a service entrance on the north side that isn't monitored, because the building owner never fixed the camera after a storm knocked it out. I remember because my patient's daughter complained about it constantly." Dante turned to look at her with an expression she had not seen from him before, something between alarm and genuine surprise. "How do you know that?" "Because I pay attention to my surroundings," Hannah said. "It's part of the job. You notice things when you're walking into strange neighborhoods alone at night for home visits." "This is not your fight, Hannah," Dante said, his voice low. "I did not tell you any of this so that you would insert yourself into it." "You didn't tell me," Hannah said. "I heard it. And now that I have, I'm not going to pretend I don't know something that could help keep you safe, just because it's inconvenient for you that I noticed." The room went quiet, Dante's associate shifting uncomfortably near the door, and Hannah watched something complicated move across Dante's face. Gratitude and fear and something that looked almost like the confession neither of them had said out loud yet. "If anything happened to you because of information you gave me," Dante said finally, "I don't know what I would do with that." "Then don't let anything happen to me," Hannah said. "But don't pretend I'm too fragile to be useful either. I chose to know you, Dante. I get to choose what I do with what I know." That night, after the associate had left and the apartment had gone quiet around them, Dante stood at Hannah's window for a long time before speaking, his back to her, his shoulders carrying a tension she had learned to recognize over the past weeks as the particular weight of a man trying to decide how honest to be. "I told myself, the first night I saw you in that parking lot," he said finally, "that I would keep my distance, that whatever I felt watching you pay for my grandmother's groceries was simple gratitude, nothing more, and that a man in my position had no business pursuing someone with an entire life outside this world." "But you didn't keep your distance," Hannah said quietly.
No.
He turned to face her. "I told myself I was protecting you by staying close enough to watch for danger. That was a lie I built so I would not have to admit the truth, which is that I wanted to be near you regardless of the danger, and used the danger as an excuse to justify wanting something I convinced myself I did not deserve." Hannah crossed the room and stood in front of him, close enough now that she could see the exact color of his eyes in the lamplight, dark brown with flecks of gold near the center she had never noticed before. "I'm not asking you to deserve anything," she said. "I'm asking you to be honest about what this is." "This is dangerous," Dante said. "This is a warehouse on Thursday and a man named Salerno who will not stop until he understands he cannot touch what belongs to me. This is a life that will never be simple or safe, Hannah, and I have no right to ask you to want that." "You're not asking," Hannah said. "I'm choosing it. There's a difference, and I need you to understand that difference before this goes any further." He kissed her then, slow and certain in a way that felt like the answer to every careful question either of them had been avoiding for weeks, and Hannah understood, kissing him back, that whatever came next with Vincent Salerno, whatever cost this choice eventually demanded, she had already decided it was worth paying. The confrontation came on a Thursday, exactly as the schedule Hannah remembered predicted, though not in the warehouse itself. Vincent Salerno, apparently anticipating that his usual routine had been compromised, moved his operation instead to a shipping yard 3 miles east, a change Dante's people caught only because Hannah, riding along against every protest Dante offered, recognized a delivery truck from the warehouse rotating through the new location and flagged it before anyone else noticed the pattern. "You should not be here," Dante said, for the 4th time that evening, as they sat in a car parked at a careful distance from the yard's chain-link perimeter. "I'm the only reason you found this location instead of sitting outside an empty warehouse all night," Hannah said. "So maybe reconsider that argument." What happened next moved faster than Hannah's mind could fully process even as she lived through it. Dante's men closing in on the yard from 2 directions while Salerno's people scattered in confusion. Gunfire cracking somewhere near the loading docks that made Hannah's entire body go rigid with a fear she had never experienced this close to its source. She watched Dante move through the chaos with a precision that looked almost choreographed, economical and certain, taking down one of Salerno's men with a controlled efficiency that told her exactly how much of his reputation had been earned rather than exaggerated by gossip. It was Salerno himself, cornered near a stack of shipping containers, who turned his weapon not toward Dante but toward the car where Hannah sat watching, apparently understanding in the chaos exactly what leverage might still save him. Hannah saw the barrel swing toward her window and moved without thinking, throwing herself sideways across the seat a half-second before the shot shattered the glass where her head had been. "Hannah!" Dante's voice cracked across the yard, raw in a way she had never heard from him, and she watched him close the remaining distance to Salerno in 3 strides, disarming him with a violence so fast and total that it was over before Hannah had fully processed that she was still alive. The silence after gunfire always felt strange, Hannah would think later, a ringing kind of quiet that made the world feel briefly unreal, and she sat up slowly, glass fragments scattered across the seat beside her, watching Dante stride back toward the car with an expression she had never seen on him before, something that looked almost like terror finally breaking through years of careful control. "You're bleeding," he said, reaching for her through the broken window, his hands finding a small cut along her cheekbone where glass had caught her. "I'm fine," Hannah said, and meant it, the adrenaline still burning too hot for the fear to fully land yet. "You're the one who just took down 3 armed men in under a minute. You almost died," Dante said, and his voice broke slightly on the word, a crack in the composure Hannah had watched hold steady through every danger she had witnessed him face. "I have buried men in this life I called brothers, Hannah, and I told myself years ago that I had made peace with every cost this world demands. I was not prepared for the cost of almost losing you." "But you didn't," Hannah said, reaching through the shattered window to hold his face in both her hands. "I moved. I'm here." "You should not have had to move at all," he said. "You should never have been in that car." "I chose to be in that car," Hannah said. "The same way I chose to pay for your grandmother's groceries, and the same way I'm choosing, right now, to tell you that whatever this world costs, I would rather pay it standing beside you than spend the rest of my life safe and wondering what it would have been like to stay." Dante was quiet for a long moment, his forehead resting against hers through the broken window, both of them breathing hard in the aftermath of violence that had nearly taken everything from both of them at once. "Say that again," he murmured. "I'm not leaving," Hannah said. "Not for Salerno. Not for the danger. Not for anything." Vincent Salerno's operation collapsed within the week, dismantled through consequences Hannah did not ask Dante to detail and understood well enough not to need explained. His name stopped appearing in the careful, lowered conversations Dante's people had around her, and though nobody said the specific word for what had happened to the man who tried to shoot her through a car window, Hannah understood the shape of it clearly enough. "You didn't have to destroy everything he built," she said to Dante, 3 nights later, sitting in his kitchen while Lucia moved contentedly between the stove and the counter, humming something in Italian that Hannah had started to recognize even without understanding the words. "I did," Dante said simply. "Not because of territory. Not even because of the warehouse or the docks. Because a man who points a gun at you does not get to continue existing in this city as though nothing happened. That is not cruelty, Hannah. That is the only language men like Salerno understand, and I have spent my entire adult life fluent in it." Hannah did not argue. She had spent 3 weeks now inside the edges of this world, long enough to understand that the safety Dante offered would never be gentle, that choosing him meant accepting a life where danger and devotion would always occupy the same room, sometimes the same hour. She had chosen it with open eyes, the same way she had chosen to help an old woman with a coin purse that could not cover $23 of groceries, without knowing where that single decision would eventually lead her. "What happens now?" she asked. "Now," Dante said, reaching for her hand across the kitchen table with a certainty that had replaced every hesitation from their first dinner. "You stop paying rent on an apartment where strange men can follow you through a parking garage, and you let me build you something safer. Not because you need rescuing. Because I intend to spend the rest of my life making sure you never again have $11 standing between you and Thursday." "I never asked you to fix my finances," Hannah said quietly. "I know," Dante said. "That is exactly why I intend to anyway." Lucia set a plate in front of Hannah without being asked, the same kind of careful attention she had shown from the very first night in Hannah's small kitchen, And Hannah looked between the old woman she had helped without expectation and the man across the table who had rearranged his entire guarded life around the fact that she had, and understood, finally, that the $11 she had spent that evening at the grocery store had bought her something far larger than she could have imagined. Standing at that register watching a cashier reach for the phone, she picked up her fork, and across the table, Dante caught her eye and held it, the way he had learned to hold it since the night in that parking lot, and Hannah understood, fully, that whatever this family's world cost her, whatever danger still waited somewhere beyond tonight's quiet dinner, she had chosen the one man in it who would never let her stand alone at a register again. Lucia sat down across from them with her own plate, still humming, and reached over to pat Hannah's hand with the same grip she had used in the grocery store parking lot weeks earlier, when gratitude had been the only thing either of them expected to exchange. "I knew," the old woman said, "the moment you paid for my groceries, that you were not like the others he brought around before. Those women saw the suits and the cars. You saw an old woman who could not pay, and you did not think twice." "I still don't think twice," Hannah said, "about either of you." "Good," Lucia said, "because this family does not let go of people who choose it honestly. We have lost enough people who left for easier lives. We do not intend to lose the ones who stayed for the hard one." Dante's hand tightened around Hannah's beneath the table, and outside the kitchen window the city moved on the way it always did, indifferent to warehouses and shipping yards and men named Salerno who no longer mattered to anyone. And Hannah understood that whatever came next, she would not be facing it from across a cold parking lot anymore. She would be facing it from exactly here at this table, with people who had already decided she belonged.